today we're going to talk about the pandemic of 1918 through 1920 and its effects on the carnival season in Mobile. And we may talk also a little bit about how that also is affecting the present pandemic that we have going on today. To do that, I'm going to try to put this on a timeline so that you can better understand what happened. And the first part of that timeline is going to be the 1917 carnival season in Mobile. Mardi Gras Day in 1917 was on February 20th, so it was a mid-February Mardi Gras. The Mobile Carnival Association had been attempting to raise somewhat of about $25,000 that would be used to promote the carnival season in Mobile. They actually achieved that. I think in some things I'd seen that they raised at least $26,000, which in 1917 is probably quite a bit of money. The money was used to promote in areas other than Mobile to bring people in to experience Carnival and also to spend money, to stay in Mobile and spend money. The Infant Mystics held their parade on their normal Monday night. The next day, the KOR and the Comic Cowboys paraded, which included the Auburn band. The Auburn University band was in town that particular year. And they also had an effort to make a floral parade in which they decorated automobiles. I suspect L.G. Adams was behind that, as he was the president of the Mobile Automobile Club. Let me get that straight. And so they also had a series of vehicles that were actually adorned with flowers. They also had a new group that showed up called the 15 Funny Fellows. And they actually won first place costume contest for the Mobile Carnival Association. And so it was a normal Mardi Gras. They even had what they called Queens of Cities, in which they had different young ladies from various areas of the Southeast to come in to participate in the carnival season. I suspect it probably was some kind of contest. Probably needs a little bit more research on it. So 1917 was a very normal carnival season. So then we get towards the Mardi Gras in 1917. By April, just about a month or two after the carnival season, the United States joined in the war in Europe in World War I, which occurred on April 6, 1917. And the war had been going on for a while. It started in 1914, but the U.S. finally got pulled into it. And so everybody had then made an effort to support the war in Europe. After that, then things started to change. The Strikers Independent Society, which would have been celebrating their 75th anniversary, actually held no event. And the event was not being held because of the war. So 1918 comes along. Mardi Gras Day in 1918 was on February the 12th. So again, a mid-February carnival season. But there was no Mardi Gras whatsoever. There may have been a handful of maskers, but for the most part, there was nothing in the city. There was the same occurred in New Orleans. New Orleans had a handful of maskers that showed up only in the daylight hours. They would not allow them to wear masks after dark because they were afraid of enemies that may take advantage of it. So for the most part, other than Pensacola, which held a patriotic Mardi Gras parade. And San Francisco, who held a societal ball for Mardi Gras, there was no carnival in 1918. But all of that effort was, and the reason why were not pandemic, but actually because of the war effort. Just after Mardi Gras in 1918, in the spring, is when what most people refer to as Spanish flu showed up. It showed up initially amongst the military personnel, and then it quickly spread to the general population. Overall, there was 4 waves of the flu, and it occurred from March of 1918. And in some cases, there's talk that it may have been even earlier than that, and pretty much disappeared by 1921. So during that time, there was a lot of effort to combat the virus, very much like we're doing now, washing hands, wearing masks. The largest flu death toll in the U.S. occurred in October of 1918, and the second largest was in September of 1918. So it was although they had cases during the summertime, it really ramped up in the fall. During that time, World War I ended. It ended actually on November 11th, 1918. And believe it or not, 6 weeks later, the strikers held their 76th annual ball, in which they refer to as the Victory Ball. And even their invitation had the American shield on it, and it was flanked by Belgian and French and English and Italian flags. So the strikers were able to put together a ball event in just 6 weeks after the end of the war. There's no reference to the pandemic in that. They actually held it, and it was an indoor event. 1919 came, and then again, Carnival gets affected. First, it gets affected by the war. Then it starts to get affected by the virus, and now it gets affected an additional time. On January 16, 1919, the 18th Amendment was ratified, which was Prohibition, which limited, if didn't prevent the consumption of alcohol, which everybody knows during Carnival is one of the mainstays. So they were having to deal with this. Mardi Gras in 1919 was a late Mardi Gras. It was actually on March the 4th. But oddly, the only things that occurred for Carnival in 1919 were indoor events. They had, there was some slight activity outside. The 15 Funny Fellows showed up again. They actually kind of paraded down the streets, and they held a ball at the Battle House Auditorium for the evening. The Athelstan Club had a masked dance on Mardi Gras Day. Moose Lodge 221 held a dance. So there were dances for Carnival in 1919, but for the most part, none of the major groups showed up, and there was very little to nothing in the streets. New Orleans had pretty much the same thing. They had mostly children and some minorities that costumed. They had some of the minor walking clubs, like the Jefferson City Buzzards, to walk through the streets. But none of their major clubs participated in it. There was some dances in the evening, but for the most part, the hotels in New Orleans were filled with the returning troops. So there was not a big effort to try to bring people in to celebrate Carnival, either in Mobile or in New Orleans. San Francisco did hold their annual societal ball for Mardi Gras. So there was some celebrations throughout the country, but they were very limited. For the most part, the ones in New Orleans indicated that it was just not enough time after the war to actually to build and construct for Mardi Gras, which typically takes at least 6 months to do. So for the most part, there was nothing in 1919 other than some indoor events. 1920 comes along. Mardi Gras Day was on February 17th that year. Again, a middle month, February, Mardi Gras. But it had been plans to monthly plans to get this back to normal. And just a week before, the Board of Health met, and they were concerned about an uprising of virus cases in the Mobile area, and actually called for the canceling of the Carnival events in it. That was given over to the city leaders, and the city leaders had to decide what to do. And they decided to continue with the festivities. Some of them actually came down to virus. John Cochran, who was supposed to be Felix in 1918 and had to resign because of the war, held a dinner for who would have been his queen in 1918, Mabel Moore, and part of the royal party of 1918. They had planned a dinner at the Battle House that had to be canceled because the Queen and some of the royal party came down with the virus. That particular year, 1920, the king was Taylor Peck, who was actually the manager of the Battle House. His queen was Dorothy Weefel. The Dragons, Order Dragons, which had not had an event since 1917, held a nightly event on Monday, February 9th, just before the discussion of the virus. Thursday night, February 12th, the Knights of Columbus held a Mardi Gras event. There was, when it got to the day before in Mardi Gras Day, was quite a bit of activity. The IMs paraded and held a ball on that Monday night with the theme of dreams. And the day started with a flyover of 12 seaplanes that was stationed in Pensacola. And they flew over the city for about 2 hours, doing a few acrobatic maneuvers to the delight of the crowd. And then by noon, Felix led the parade with KOR right behind him, as always, with their theme being Smiles, and with the Comic Cowboys. So they held a very normal Mardi Gras event in 1920, even though the virus was very much in the city. There was a public costume contest around 4:30 around Beanville Square. That was led by one of the official carnival bands. The judging happening at the Queen's stand in front of the Athelstan Club. The city actually had several ships in port, which they had not had since 1917. They had the USS Blakely. They had 2 U.S. submarines, the S-3, the S-4. They even had a German subsea boat, the U-111. And all of these were visited and seen by many of the people in the city. Later in the evening, rain came, and it was described as torrents of rain, and that ended up being a killer for the OOM's nightly parade. They did not have a parade, but they did hold a ball that night. There were a few arrests, which is usually the case with overindulgence in the city, but in this case there were few arrests, and they attributed it because of the absence of liquor in the city. They actually arrested 7 on drunken charges. In New Orleans, they held one of their first parades since 1970 was led by the Rex Parade, which was the only major group to parade that year. They were kind of rained on, with Rex's beard being frosted and frosted with a mist is what was referred to. But it seems that the street crowds were not very jolly, and so it was a kind of a downer carnival season for the city. And there was also virus concerns in New Orleans in 1920, just as it was in Mobile. By 1921, everything had gone back to normal. February 8th was Mardi Gras Day in 1921, and they ended up having the Double OMs having their parade that was scheduled the year before, using the same theme and same floats that was meant for 1920. So overall, Carnival was really more affected during that pandemic time by war, and even Prohibition more so than the virus itself. So it brings about the time now of what's going on now, and you see that some of the ball groups now have canceled their functions, and now some of the parading groups are now canceling their functions. It will be interesting to see how this all transpires over time, as there's still enough time for groups to conduct both their ball and street parades if they choose to. And I guess only time will tell. But for the most part, Carnival is probably being more affected by a pandemic at this time than it ever has in the past.